The history books in the Silver City will tell you that King Kaelen Thorne reclaimed his throne through a bloody war on the battlefield. They are lying. The true war for the crown didn't start in a palace or a war room. It started in a rotting wooden cabin, buried under 6 feet of snow, with a banished Omega who had nothing left to lose. She didn't know the dying wolf bleeding out on her doorstep was the most powerful man in the world. She just knew he was shivering. But when you save a monster, you have to be prepared for what comes hunting after him. This is the story of how a 3-day blizzard changed the fate of an empire. The thermometer nailed to the porch post read 20 degrees below zero. But Elara Vance didn't need a gauge to know the cold was lethal. It was the kind of cold that didn't just bite. It chewed through layers of wool and bit straight into the bone. Elara adjusted the strap of her rifle, her boots crunching heavily through the fresh crust of snow that had fallen over Blackwood Ridge. This was the edge, the lawless strip of territory between the human sectors and the Lycan sovereign lands. It was where the unwanted went to disappear, or in Elara's case, where the unwanted were sent to die quietly. She wasn't supposed to survive her first winter here. That was the sentence, passed down by the High Council of her former pack, the Moon River Syndicate. Omega Elara Vance, for the crime of refusing a tactical mating union, you are hereby stripped of rank and banished to the ridge. That was 2 years ago. They thought the elements would kill her. They underestimated just how stubborn Elara was. She reached the perimeter of her cabin, a sad, slanted structure of timber and corrugated tin she had reinforced with scavenged scrap metal. The wind howled, a mournful, shrieking sound that usually signaled a blizzard was about to upgrade from dangerous to catastrophic. She was reaching for the frozen door handle when she smelled it. Iron, salt, copper, blood. Elara froze, her grip tightening on the rifle. In the ridge, blood usually meant one of 2 things: a starving bear or a rogue wolf looking for an easy meal. She scanned the tree line, her heart hammering against her ribs. The white landscape was blindingly bright under the grey sky, but nothing moved. Then she looked down. At the base of her porch stairs, half buried in a drift, was a massive shape. It was dark as pitch, stark against the pristine snow. Elara stepped closer, rifle raised. It was a wolf. But not just any wolf. The sheer size of the beast was terrifying. Easily the size of a small horse, with thick, matted fur that looked like midnight. It wasn't moving. "Hey," she called out, her voice raspy from the dry air. "If you're dead, you're becoming a rug." The beast didn't flinch. Elara lowered the gun slightly and crept forward. As she got closer, the metallic scent of blood became overwhelming. She saw the source, a jagged, ugly wound on the wolf's flank, oozing dark crimson that steamed in the freezing air. The snow around the beast was stained pink. She prodded the wolf's shoulder with the barrel of her rifle. A low, wet growl vibrated in the animal's throat, but it was weak. The wolf opened one eye. It wasn't the feral yellow eye of a mindless rogue. It was a piercing, intelligent shade of stormy blue. It looked at her not with aggression, but with a terrifying, sentient awareness. He's a shifter, Elara realized. And he's dying. Logic told her to leave him. A wounded male shifter in the ridge was bad news. It meant pack wars. It meant bounty hunters. It meant trouble she couldn't afford. The wolf let out a huff of air, his massive head sinking back into the snow. He shivered, a full-body convulsion that rattled his massive frame. Elara cursed under her breath. She looked at the darkening sky. The blizzard was descending. If she left him here, he would be a frozen statue by morning. "You better not kill me when you wake up," she muttered. She slung the rifle over her back and grabbed the wolf's hind legs. He was impossibly heavy, a dead weight of muscle and bone. Gritting her teeth, Elara dug her boots into the ice. With a scream of effort, she began to drag him. It took her 20 minutes to move him 10 feet. By the time she hauled him over the threshold of her cabin and kicked the door shut against the screaming wind, her lungs were burning and her arms felt like jelly. She collapsed on the floor next to the giant beast. The cabin was only slightly warmer than the outside, the wood stove currently just a bed of dying embers. The wolf groaned. "I know," Elara panted, scrambling to her feet to lock the heavy deadbolt. "Room service sucks here." She moved to the wood stove, shoving in split logs and fanning the flames until the fire roared to life. The orange glow illuminated the small, cluttered room. It also illuminated the wolf's wound. Now that they were inside, Elara could see it clearly. It wasn't a claw mark or a bite. It was a gunshot wound, and judging by the black, necrotic veins spreading from the hole in his flank, the bullet was pure silver. "Who are you?" she whispered, grabbing her first aid kit from the shelf. "And who wants you dead this badly?" For the first 6 hours, Elara operated with the focus of a combat medic. She had no anesthesia, no sterile operating room, and no help. She only had a bottle of cheap whiskey, a pair of tweezers, and a needle and thread she usually used to patch her coat. The wolf, whom she had mentally named Shadow, for lack of a better option, drifted in and out of consciousness. Every time she dug into the wound to fish out the silver fragments, his body would tense, muscles hard as rock, and a growl would rumble through the floorboards. "Easy," she soothed, pouring whiskey over the open wound. The wolf thrashed, his jaws snapping inches from her face. "Don't you dare!" Elara shouted, smacking his nose lightly. "I am saving your life, you ungrateful, oversized rug. Stay still." Surprisingly, the wolf froze. Those blue eyes locked onto hers, filled with pain. But he stopped thrashing. He allowed her to finish. When she finally pulled the deformed silver slug out of his flesh, she dropped it into a metal bowl with a clink. She stitched him up, her hands shaking from exhaustion, and packed the wound with a poultice of herbs she had gathered in the summer, yarrow for clotting and dried garlic for infection. By midnight, the cabin was warm. Elara sat in her rocking chair, the rifle across her lap, watching him. He hadn't shifted back to human form. That was bad. It meant he was too weak, or the silver poisoning was preventing the transformation. "You're a long way from the glamorous cities," Elara said into the silence. She took a sip of the whiskey. "Nobody comes to the ridge unless they're running. Did you steal money? Sleep with the wrong alpha's mate?" The wolf lifted his head. He watched her intently. "I'm Elara, by the way," she said, "since we're roommates now." The wolf blinked slowly. He extended a massive paw, resting it on her boot. Elara stared at the paw. It was a gesture of thanks. It was also a gesture of submission, acknowledging her as the provider of safety. For a male of his size, clearly an alpha or high-ranking soldier, to show such vulnerability to an omega was unheard of. "You're welcome," she whispered. Day 2 passed in a blur of routine. Elara fed him venison jerky and water from a ladle. The fever from the silver poisoning spiked, making the wolf thrash in his sleep. Elara spent the night on the floor next to him, pressing cool rags to his snout and murmuring stories about her childhood, just to keep him grounded in reality. She found herself admiring him. Even in his weakened state, there was a nobility to him. He was fastidious, trying to drag himself to the door when he needed to relieve himself, refusing to soil her home despite his pain. By the evening of the second day, The blizzard outside was burying the cabin. The snow was piled halfway up the windows. Elara was reading a worn-out paperback by the fire when she felt a wet nose nudge her hand. She looked down. The wolf was standing. His legs were shaky, but he was upright. "Look at you," she smiled, scratching him behind the ears. "Ready to run a marathon?" He leaned his weight against her leg, a heavy, comforting pressure. Elara felt a strange warmth bloom in her chest. She had been alone for 2 years. The isolation was a physical ache she had learned to ignore. Having another living being here, even a silent, 4-legged one, made the cabin feel less like a prison and more like a home. "Don't get used to it," she warned him, though her voice was soft. "Once the snow clears, you go. I can't afford a house guest." The wolf looked at her, and for a second, Elara swore she felt a pull, a tug in her gut, like a static shock before you touch a doorknob. "The mate bond?" She shook her head, dismissing the thought immediately. Impossible. She was a banished Omega. He was, well, judging by the silver bullet, he was likely a criminal or a high-value target. Fate wouldn't be cruel enough to pair them. Day 3 brought silence. The wind had died down. Elara woke up with a start. The fire had burned down to ash. The cabin was cold. She sat up, her blanket falling from her shoulders. Shadow. The spot on the rug where the wolf had lain for 2 days was empty. Panic surged through her. She scrambled up and ran to the door. It was unlocked, slightly ajar. She threw the door open. The world outside was blinding white, the storm having left behind 4 feet of fresh powder. She scanned the horizon. "Shadow!" she screamed, her voice echoing off the pine trees. Nothing. Just the pristine, unbroken silence of the winter wilderness. He was gone. No note, obviously. No goodbye. Just gone. Elara felt a sharp pang of betrayal. She had saved his life. She had shared her meager food supply, and he had vanished the moment he could stand on 4 legs. "Fine," she spat, slamming the door shut. "Good riddance." She tried to go back to her routine. She cleaned the bloodstains off the floor. She restocked the woodpile. But the cabin felt emptier than it ever had before. It was late afternoon when the vibration started. At first, Elara thought it was another storm rolling in. But the low rumble wasn't coming from the sky. It was coming from the ground. Her coffee mug rattled on the table. The loose floorboards began to shake. Elara grabbed her rifle and ran to the window. Her breath hitched in her throat. Coming up the narrow, winding logging road that led to her cabin wasn't a bear. It wasn't a rogue wolf. It was a convoy. 3 matte-black armored SUVs, modified with heavy-tread snow tires and reinforced bumpers, were tearing through the drifts. Behind them was a military-grade troop transport truck. On the side of the lead vehicle, emblazoned in silver, was a crest Elara hadn't seen in years. A howling wolf wrapped in thorns. The House of Thorne. Elara's blood ran cold. The House of Thorne wasn't just a pack. It was the Royal Guard. It was the personal enforcement arm of the Alpha King himself. They weren't here for a social call. He was a criminal, Elara whispered to herself, horror dawning on her. I harbored a fugitive from the crown. She checked her rifle, realizing how pathetic the single-shot hunting weapon looked against an armored convoy. She was dead. They were going to execute her for treason. The convoy screeched to a halt 20 yards from her cabin. Doors flew open. A dozen men poured out. They were dressed in tactical black combat gear, carrying assault rifles that made Elara's gun look like a toy. They fanned out with practiced precision, surrounding the cabin in seconds. "Elara Vance," a voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "Exit the dwelling with your hands visible, immediately!" Elara leaned her forehead against the cold door. She had 2 choices: die in a shootout she couldn't win, or surrender and beg for a quick execution. She set the rifle down. She took a deep breath. She opened the door. She stepped out onto the porch, raising her hands. The laser sights of 12 rifles danced across her chest. "I'm unarmed!" she shouted. The soldiers didn't lower their weapons, but the formation parted. From the back of the lead SUV, a man stepped out. He was tall, powerfully built, wearing a long charcoal wool coat over a tailored suit. He didn't look like a soldier. He looked like a monarch. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that was sharp, angular, and devastatingly handsome. But it was his aura that hit Elara like a physical blow. The sheer power radiating off him forced the air from her lungs. This was an Alpha Prime. He walked toward the porch, his boots crunching on the snow. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at her. Elara met his gaze, and then she gasped. His eyes, they were a piercing, stormy blue. The man didn't smile. His expression was unreadable, cold as the ice around them. "I believe," the man said, his voice deep and smooth like velvet dragged over gravel, "that you have something of mine." Elara's brows furrowed. "I don't understand. I don't have anything." The man took a step up. "My life, Miss Vance. You have my life." He wasn't looking at her like a savior. He was looking at her like a loose end. "I am Kaelen Thorne," he said, "King of the Silver City. And we need to talk about what you saw." The silence on the porch was heavier than the snowdrift surrounding them. Elara stood shivering, not from the cold, but from the sheer radiating pressure of the man standing at the base of her stairs. Kaelen Thorne, the Alpha King, the ruler of the entire lycanthropic socio-political sphere, and she had poured cheap whiskey on his open wounds and called him an oversized rug. "You," Elara started, her voice trembling before she steeled herself. She crossed her arms, refusing to cower. "You left without saying goodbye. And now you're back with a firing squad. Is this how royalty says thank you?" One of the soldiers behind Kaelen, a hulking brute with a scar running down his jaw, stepped forward, his rifle raising slightly. "Watch your tone with the king, Omega." Kaelen didn't turn around. He simply held up a hand, and the soldier froze instantly, stepping back into formation. Kaelen's eyes never left Elara's. "I didn't leave because I wanted to," Kaelen said, ascending the stairs. He moved with a predatory grace that was entirely different from the wounded animal she had dragged inside. This was a man used to the world bending around him. "I woke up. I realized my location was compromised. I had to draw any potential pursuers away from this cabin before they picked up your scent. I ran 5 miles into the tree line before I collapsed, and my extraction team found me." He stopped directly in front of her. He was massive, towering over her by a foot. Up close, he smelled of expensive cologne, gunpowder, and the lingering, primal scent of the wolf she had slept beside. "May I come in?" he asked. It was phrased as a question, but the tone made it clear it was a command. Elara stepped aside. "It's your kingdom. I just live in the dirt." Kaelen stepped into the cabin. The space was suddenly claustrophobic. His presence filled every corner. He looked around the small room. The peeling wallpaper, the single cot, the bucket she used for water. His gaze landed on the bloodstain on the rug near the fire. He walked over to it, crouching down. He ran a gloved finger over the dark spot. "You dug a silver nitrate hollow point out of my liver with sewing tweezers," Kaelen murmured. He stood up and turned to her. "Do you know what happens to a wolf when silver enters the bloodstream, Elara?" "It burns," she answered. "It stops the healing factor. It kills within hours." "Exactly. I should be dead," Kaelen said. "My physicians at the Citadel are calling it a miracle. They say whoever stitched me up had hands steady enough for neurosurgery and the instincts of a field medic. He walked closer to her, invading her personal space. Elara's back hit the door. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Why are you here?" she whispered. "If you're okay, just go. Leave me alone." "I can't," Kaelen said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "The bullet you pulled out of me. It wasn't from a rogue hunter. It was a standard-issue round from the Royal Guard Armory, specifically a prototype batch issued only to my personal security detail." Elara's eyes widened. "Someone on your team shot you." "An assassination attempt," Kaelen confirmed. "Someone high up, someone who knew my patrol route. I barely escaped into the river, which washed me downstream to your territory." He placed a hand on the doorframe above her head, leaning in. "Here is the problem, Elara. The people who want me dead are thorough. They will track where I went. They will find the blood trail. They will find this cabin." "So?" Elara challenged, though her stomach churned. "So," Kaelen said darkly, "if they find you, they will torture you to find out what you know, and then they will put a bullet in your head to tie up the loose end. You saved the king. That makes you an accessory to the survival of their enemy." The reality of his words crashed into her. She had saved a life, and in doing so, she had signed her own death warrant. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I'm not leaving you here to be slaughtered," Kaelen said. "You're packing a bag. You're coming with me." "I can't," Elara protested. "I'm banished. If I enter the capital, I'll be arrested on sight. My sentence is exile for life." Kaelen's lips quirked into a humorless smile. "I am the king. I am the law. Your banishment is suspended effective immediately. Now pack. You have 5 minutes before we move out." "And if I refuse?" Kaelen's blue eyes flashed. "Then I will have my guards sedate you, throw you over a shoulder, and carry you. I prefer the walking option, but I am not picky." Elara glared at him, hatred and fear warring in her chest. She knew he wasn't bluffing. She pushed past him, grabbing a duffel bag from under her cot. She threw in her few possessions, 2 changes of clothes, her mother's locket, the book she was reading, and her knife. She didn't look at him as she zipped the bag. "Let's go," she snapped. Kaelen opened the door. He placed a hand on the small of her back to guide her out. The touch burned through her coat. As they stepped onto the porch, Kaelen signaled to his men. "Torch it." Elara froze. "What?" "The cabin," Kaelen said, not breaking stride. "Burn it to the ground." "No," Elara screamed, trying to turn back. "That's my home. It's all I have." Kaelen's arm wrapped around her waist, restraining her effortlessly. "It's a crime scene, and it's a beacon for my enemies. If we leave it standing, they'll find DNA. They'll find your scent. If we burn it, it's just a tragedy in the woods. Dead ends." "You bastard!" Elara cried, tears stinging her eyes as a soldier threw an incendiary grenade through the open door. A dull thump shook the structure, and seconds later, flames roared out of the windows. Elara watched her life go up in smoke. The books she had scavenged, the blankets she had mended, the only shelter she had known for 2 hellish years, gone in an instant. Kaelen didn't let her go. He marched her toward the armored SUV. "Get in the car, Elara. You can hate me later. Right now, I need you alive." She was shoved into the back seat of the middle SUV. The leather was soft, the interior warm. Kaelen slid in beside her. The door slammed shut, sealing them in a soundproof, bulletproof bubble. As the convoy began to move, Elara looked out the tinted window. She watched the orange glow of her burning cabin fade into the white distance. She turned to Kaelen, who was typing on a secure tablet, already dismissing the destruction he had caused. "I will make you pay for this," she hissed. Kaelen paused. He looked at her, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine emotion crossed his face. Regret? No. Something harder. Resolve. "I'm counting on it," he said. The journey took 4 hours. They drove south, leaving the frozen wasteland of the ridge and entering the dense, evergreen forests of the inner sanctuary. The roads turned from gravel to smooth asphalt. Elara sat in silence the entire ride. She refused to look at Kaelen. She focused on the scenery changing outside. She saw signs of civilization, power lines, other cars, and eventually the towering skyline of the Silver City in the distance. But the convoy didn't head toward the city. Instead, it veered off onto a private road winding up a mountain cliffside. "Where are we going?" Elara asked, her voice hoarse. "The palace?" "Too public," Kaelen said without looking up from his tablet. "If there is a traitor in my court, I cannot walk through the front door with a witness they want dead. We are going to Greystone, my private estate." The car slowed as it approached a massive iron gate. Guards in full tactical gear, wearing the king's personal crest, scanned the vehicles before waving them through. They drove up a long driveway lined with ancient oaks. At the top of the hill sat Greystone Manor. It was a fortress disguised as a mansion. Stone walls, high turrets, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the valley below. It was beautiful, cold, and imposing, just like its owner. The car stopped. A valet opened the door. Kaelen stepped out and offered a hand to Elara. She ignored it, climbing out on her own. Her boots, muddy and worn, looked ridiculous against the pristine cobblestone driveway. "Marcus!" Kaelen barked. A man jogged down the front steps. He was lean, wiry, with glasses and a nervous energy that contrasted with the soldiers. This was Marcus Sterling, the royal beta and Kaelen's chief strategist. "You're alive," Marcus breathed, looking Kaelen over. "When we lost the tracker signal, I thought—" "I'm fine," Kaelen cut him off. "Thanks to her." He gestured to Elara. Marcus adjusted his glasses, looking Elara up and down with critical eyes. He sniffed the air. "An Omega? From the ridge? Sire, she smells like poverty and smoke." "She smells like the reason I'm breathing," Kaelen said sharply. "Is the perimeter secure?" "Yes, sire. We have the estate on lockdown. No one knows you're here except the extraction team and me." "Good." Kaelen turned to Elara. "Marcus will show you to your quarters. You will have access to the West Wing. You are not to leave the grounds. You are not to contact anyone. You are legally a ghost." "And what are you going to do?" Elara asked. "I have a traitor to hunt," Kaelen said. "And I need to shower." He walked up the stairs, his coat billowing behind him, disappearing into the house without a backward glance. Marcus sighed, looking at Elara. "Follow me, Miss Vance. And please, try not to touch anything valuable." Elara was led through hallways that cost more than her entire bloodline. Marble floors, chandeliers made of crystal, oil paintings of stern-looking ancestors. Marcus opened a set of double doors. "These are the guest quarters, or in your case, the protection detail quarters." The room was larger than her entire cabin. It had a king-sized bed with silk sheets, a fireplace, and a balcony. "Dinner is at 8, Marcus said. "The king expects you to be presentable. There are clothes in the wardrobe. Try to find something that doesn't look like it was stolen from a corpse." He closed the door, leaving her alone. Elara dropped her duffel bag on the floor. She walked to the mirror. She looked wild. Her hair was matted with wind and snow, her face smudged with soot from the fire. She looked like a feral creature brought indoors. She stripped off her clothes and walked into the bathroom. It was a spa, essentially. She turned the shower on, standing under the scalding hot water for 30 minutes, scrubbing the smell of the ridge off her skin. When she came out, wrapped in a plush robe, she opened the wardrobe. It was filled with clothes, expensive, tailored clothes, dresses, silk blouses, cashmere sweaters. He planned this, she realized. He keeps a wardrobe for female guests? The thought made her stomach twist with jealousy, which angered her even more. She chose a simple black dress. It was modest, but clung to her curves in a way her heavy winter coats never did. She sat on the edge of the bed, waiting. She was a prisoner in a palace. At 8 p.m. exactly, a knock came at the door. A servant led her to the dining room. It was a long, cavernous room, lit by candlelight. Kaelen sat at the head of the table. He had showered and changed. He was wearing a black dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. He looked refreshed, the color back in his face. He stood when she entered. His eyes swept over her, lingering on the exposed skin of her neck. His pupils dilated slightly, a biological alpha response. "You clean up well, Elara," he said softly. "I wish I could say the same for your manners," she replied, taking the seat furthest from him. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was incredible. Steak, roasted vegetables, red wine. But Elara could barely taste it. "Why were you banished?" Kaelen asked suddenly. Elara froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "That's none of your business. You are living in my house, eating my food, and under my protection. Everything about you is my business," Kaelen said calmly. "I looked at your file. It says insubordination and refusal of a tactical union. That's vague legal jargon." Elara put her fork down. "My alpha, the alpha of the Moon River Pack, he sold me." Kaelen stopped eating. "Explain." "He made a deal with a neighboring pack to secure a trade route. Part of the deal was a breeding omega." "Me." Elara's voice shook, but she forced herself to continue. "The male they wanted to pair me with. He was a monster. He had killed 2 mates before. Everyone knew it. But my alpha didn't care. He ordered me to mate with him." She looked Kaelen in the eye. I said no. I told him I would rather die in the snow than warm the bed of a murderer. So he gave me my wish. He stripped my rank and threw me in the ridge. The room was deadly silent. The fire crackled in the hearth. Kaelen stared at her. His expression had shifted. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a dark, simmering intensity. His wolf was near the surface. "Who was it?" Kaelen asked quietly. "Which alpha?" "Alpha Gorman," Elara said. Kaelen picked up his wine glass, taking a slow sip. "Gorman? I see. Why does it matter?" Elara asked. "It was 2 years ago. I'm a nobody." "It matters," Kaelen said, "because the system that allows alphas to sell omegas like cattle is the system I have been trying to dismantle since I took the throne. It is the reason half the council hates me. It is likely the reason someone put a bullet in me." He stood, up, walking down the length of the table until he stood beside her chair. He didn't touch her, but his heat radiated over her. "You are not a nobody, Elara Vance," he whispered. "You are the woman who defied an alpha and survived the ridge. And now you are the woman who saved the king." He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, we stop hiding. Tomorrow, I introduce you to the court as my personal guest, and we will see who flinches." Elara shivered. "You're using me as bait." "Yes," Kaelen admitted, pulling back to look at her. "But I promise you this. Whoever comes for you, I will rip their throat out." He turned and walked out of the room. Elara sat alone in the candlelight, touching her neck where his breath had lingered. She was terrified. She was angry. But for the first time in 2 years, she wasn't cold. The next morning, Elara didn't wake up to the sound of wind howling against a tin roof. She woke up to the sound of a garment bag being unzipped with the precision of a body bag. She sat up, clutching the silk duvet to her chest. Standing at the foot of her bed was a team of 3 people. They weren't soldiers, but they looked just as dangerous. They held brushes, pallets, and steaming garment steamers like weapons. "Up," the leader said. She was a severe woman with a silver bob cut, named Celine. "The king requires you ready by 18 hours. We have a lot of work to do. The freeze-dried in a cabin look is not in season this year." For the next 6 hours, Elara was scrubbed, polished, and painted. They didn't just dress her, they armored her. They applied makeup that highlighted the sharp angles of her cheekbones, making her look fierce rather than soft. They styled her hair into a complex, elegant updo that exposed the long, vulnerable line of her neck. Then, the dress. It wasn't black. It was a deep, violent shade of crimson. Blood red. It was a floor-length gown made of heavy silk that rippled like liquid when she moved. It had a plunging back and a slit that went up to her thigh, revealing the gun holster strapped to her leg. "The king insisted on the accessory," Celine said dryly, adjusting the strap of the holster against Elara's thigh. "A compact Glock 43. Loaded. 1 in the chamber." Elara stared at herself in the full-length mirror. She didn't recognize the woman staring back. The exile was gone. In her place stood a woman who looked like she could burn a city down. "Why?" Elara whispered. "Why does he want me to look like this?" "Because," a deep voice answered from the doorway. "Predators only respect other predators." Elara turned. Kaelen was leaning against the doorframe. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than the entire Moon River Pack's annual budget. He looked devastating, but his eyes were cold, calculating. He walked into the room, dismissing the styling team with a wave of his hand. They scurried out, closing the heavy doors. Kaelen circled her slowly. "Tonight is the Winter Solstice Gala. Every alpha from the 12 territories will be there. The council members, the press, and, undoubtedly, the person who ordered my death." He stopped in front of her, reaching out to adjust the diamond necklace resting on her collarbone. His knuckles grazed her skin, sending a jolt of electricity through her that made her knees weak. "You are not going as my date, Elara," he said softly. "You are going as my statement. By bringing a banished Omega, the very one who saved my life, I am telling the council that I do not care about their caste system. I am telling them that I am untouchable. And I am watching to see who gets angry." "And what do I do?" Elara asked, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her gut. "You stand beside me," Kaelen said. "You look beautiful. And if anyone tries to touch you, use the gun." The drive to the citadel was a blur of city lights and rain. They rode in the back of a vintage Rolls-Royce Phantom, part of a motorcade that stopped traffic in the Silver City. When they arrived at the Grand Hall, the paparazzi flashbulbs were blinding. It was a wall of white noise and screaming voices. "King Kaelen! King Kaelen! Who is the woman? Is it true you were wounded?" Kaelen ignored them all. He stepped out, buttoning his jacket, and offered his hand to Elara. She took it. His grip was iron-tight, grounding her. They walked up the red carpet, the crimson of her dress matching the velvet under her feet. A hush fell over the crowd as they realized who she was. The scent of an Omega was distinct, sweet, soft. But Elara held her head high, her eyes scanning the crowd with the vigilance of someone who had survived the ridge. They entered the ballroom. It was a cavernous space, filled with gold leaf, crystal chandeliers, and 500 of the most powerful werewolves in the world. The music stopped. Conversations died. 500 pairs of eyes locked onto them. "Breathe," Kaelen murmured out of the corner of his mouth. He led her through the crowd. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Elara could hear the whispers. Who is she? An Omega? At the gala? Is that Elara Vance, the banished one? Kaelen walked straight to the center of the room, where the High Council stood holding crystal flutes of champagne. "Councillors," Kaelen said, his voice carrying effortlessly. "I apologize for my lateness. I had unforeseen complications in the ridge." One of the councillors, a bloated man with watery eyes named Councillor Harkin, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we heard rumors of an accident. We are relieved to see you well. But this guest? Surely there is a mistake. This is a sanctioned event." "No mistake," Kaelen said, his hand sliding to rest possessively on Elara's lower back. "This is Elara Vance. She is the reason I am standing here tonight. While my security detail failed, she succeeded. She is under my personal protection." A ripple of shock went through the circle. Then, a voice cut through the tension like a whip. "Elara?" Elara froze. She knew that voice. It was the stuff of her nightmares. She turned slowly. Standing near the buffet table, holding a glass of scotch, was a man with greying temples and a cruel, handsome face. Alpha Gorman, the man who had banished her. He walked toward them, his eyes wide with disbelief, then narrowing with rage. "You have some nerve, girl, showing your face in civilized society after what you did." Kaelen's grip on her waist tightened, but he didn't intervene yet. He waited. "Hello, Alpha," Elara said. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. "I see you haven't changed, still trying to bully people smaller than you." Gorman laughed, a harsh, barking sound. He looked at Kaelen. "Your Majesty, this female is a fugitive of the Moon River Syndicate. She was banished for treason against her pack. By the laws of the sovereign lands, she is property of the state. I demand she be remanded to my custody immediately." The room went deadly silent. This was a direct challenge to the king. Kaelen released Elara. He took a step toward Gorman. He didn't shout. He didn't growl. He simply let his aura, the sheer, crushing weight of his Alpha Prime dominance, flood the room. Waiters dropped trays. Weaker wolves fell to their knees. Gorman turned pale, sweat beading on his forehead as the pressure hit him. "You demand?" Kaelen repeated softly. "You demand something of me, Gorman?" "The law," Gorman stammered, his knees buckling. "The law says an Omega belongs to her pack," Kaelen said. "But Elara has no pack. You took that from her. You threw her into the snow to die. You forfeited your claim." Kaelen leaned in, his face inches from Gorman's. "And let me be clear. If you ever look at her, speak to her, or even think about her again, I will strip the skin from your body and hang it from the citadel gates as a warning to anyone else who thinks they can sell women like cattle." He stepped back, straightening his cuffs. "Now, get out of my sight." Gorman scrambled back, humiliated, and fled the ballroom. Kaelen turned back to the room, raising his voice. "Let this be known. Elara Vance is under the protection of the House of Thorne. An attack on her is an act of war against the crown. Enjoy the party." He turned to Elara, offering his arm again. "Shall we dance?" Elara stared at him, her heart pounding. She had expected to be bait. She hadn't expected to be avenged. They danced. It was a waltz, slow and formal. Kaelen moved with surprising grace for a man of his size. His hand was warm on her back, his blue eyes locked on hers. "You enjoyed that?" Elara accused him quietly as they spun. "I enjoy justice," Kaelen corrected, "and I enjoy watching cowards run." "He won't stop," Elara said. "Gorman is petty. He'll try something." "Gorman is a distraction," Kaelen whispered, pulling her closer so their bodies were flush. "He's not smart enough to orchestrate the assassination attempt on me. He's a brute, not a tactician. The person who shot me, they are still in this room." Elara scanned the crowd over his shoulder. The glitter of diamonds, the fake smiles. Any one of them could be a killer. "Do you have a suspect?" she asked. "3, Kaelen said. "Councillor Harkin, General Vance, no relation to you, I assume, and my own uncle, Duke Silas." Elara looked toward the bar. Duke Silas was a charming, elderly wolf with white hair, laughing with a group of debutantes. "Your uncle? He looks like a Santa Claus." "He's the next in line for the throne if I die without an heir," Kaelen said grimly. "Ambition creates monsters." The song ended. Kaelen bowed to her, but before he could speak, a young aide hurried over, looking pale. "Your Majesty," the aide whispered. "There is a secure call from the northern border. It's urgent. Level 1 clearance." Kaelen frowned. Level 1 meant an invasion or a catastrophe. "I have to take this," Kaelen said to Elara. "Stay here. Do not leave the ballroom. Marcus is watching you from the balcony." He squeezed her hand and followed the aide toward the private study. Elara was left alone in the middle of the dance floor. She felt exposed. She walked toward the edge of the room, grabbing a glass of water from a passing tray. She needed to clear her head. She found a quiet corner near the terrace doors, half hidden by a large potted fern. She watched the room, her hand brushing the holster under her dress for comfort. "Quite a show you put on," a voice said. Elara tensed. She turned to see a woman standing next to her. She was beautiful, with platinum blonde hair and a dress made of silver sequins. She looked like an ice sculpture come to life. "I don't believe we've met," the woman said, extending a hand. "I'm Lady Seraphina, Duke Silas's daughter. Kaelen's cousin." "Elara," she replied cautiously, not taking the hand. Seraphina smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You know, my cousin has a weakness for strays. He always brings home injured birds, but he usually gets bored of them once they heal." "I'm not a bird," Elara said coldly, "and I'm not planning on staying." "Oh, I know," Seraphina said, taking a sip of her champagne. "Because you don't belong here, darling. This world, it eats people like you, the politics, the lies. It's not a cabin in the woods. Here, the wolves smile before they bite." Elara turned to leave. "Excuse me." "Wait," Seraphina said, her voice dropping an octave. "You should know something about the night Kaelen was shot." Elara stopped. She turned back. "What about it?" Seraphina stepped closer, her perfume cloying and sweet. "The bullet came from a prototype rifle. Only 3 people have access to that armory." "Kaelen told me," Elara said. "Did he tell you that he signed out the rifle that morning?" Seraphina whispered. Elara frowned. "What? That makes no sense. Why would he shoot himself?" "Not himself," Seraphina said, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Think, Elara. He needs a reason to purge the council. He needs a reason to declare martial law. What better excuse than a failed assassination attempt? He staged it. He shot himself, non-lethal, of course, to gain sympathy and power." "You're lying," Elara said, though a seed of doubt planted itself in her chest. Kaelen was calculating. Was he that calculating? "Am I?" Serafina laughed softly. Ask him. Ask him why the security cameras on his patrol route were turned off by his personal override code 10 minutes before the shot was fired. Elara's mind raced. It was too convenient. The way he found her. The way he used her tonight to humiliate Gorman. Was she just a prop in a political theatre? Why are you telling me this? Elara asked. Because, Serafina said, reaching out to tuck a stray hair behind Elara's ear. I don't like seeing innocent things get crushed in the gears. Suddenly, the glass doors to the terrace shattered. Crash! The sound was like an explosion. The music cut out. Screams erupted. Elara threw herself to the floor as shards of glass rained down. "Get down!" someone screamed. Gunfire. Automatic gunfire ripping through the velvet curtains of the ballroom. Elara scrambled behind a marble pillar, her heart hammering. She reached for the gun on her thigh. She ripped the skirt of her dress to free the holster and drew the Glock. She peered around the pillar. 5 men in tactical gear, wearing ski masks, no crests, were rappelling down from the skylights. They weren't shooting at the crowd randomly. They were shooting at the royal guards, and they were moving toward the private study. Kaelen, the call, the urgent call from the north. It was a lure. It was a trap to separate him from his guards. Elara looked at Serafina. The blonde woman was crouching behind an overturned table. She wasn't screaming. She was checking her watch. Elara realized with a jolt of horror. Serafina wasn't warning her. She was stalling her. She was keeping Elara occupied while the hit squad moved into position. "Traitors!" Elara screamed, leveling her Glock. She fired. The shot went wide, hitting a vase, but it drew the attention of the nearest gunman. He turned his rifle toward her. Elara dove as bullets chipped the marble pillar inches from her head. She had to get to the study. She had to warn Kaelen. She kicked off her high heels and ran. She was fast. Omegas were built for evasion. She sprinted low, weaving through the panicked crowd. "Stop her!" Serafina shrieked from across the room. 2 of the gunmen turned their aim toward Elara. She slid across the polished floor, skidding under a banquet table, just as a hail of bullets tore through the tablecloth. She crawled out the other side and burst into the hallway leading to the study. At the end of the hall, the heavy oak doors of the study were closed. "Kaelen!" she screamed. "It's a trap!" The doors exploded outward. A body flew through the air, crashing into the opposite wall. It was one of the assassins. Kaelen stepped out of the smoke. He had shifted partially. His hands were claws, his eyes were glowing neon blue, and his canines were fully extended. His suit was shredded. He held a second assassin by the throat, lifting him off the ground like a rag doll. "You'll have to do better than that," Kaelen roared, snapping the man's neck and tossing him aside. He looked up and saw Elara running toward him, barefoot, gun in hand, her red dress torn. "Elara!" he shouted. "Get back!" "Behind you!" she yelled. A third assassin had dropped from the ceiling vent behind Kaelen, a silver knife glinting in his hand. Elara didn't think. She raised the Glock. She exhaled. She squeezed the trigger. Bang! The assassin dropped, a bullet hole in the center of his forehead. Kaelen spun around, seeing the dead man inches from his back. He looked at Elara, shock warring with admiration in his wild eyes. But there was no time for romance. "The study is compromised," Kaelen growled, grabbing her hand. "They rigged the building. We have to go, now!" As they sprinted down the service corridor, a massive explosion rocked the ballroom behind them. The floor beneath them buckled. Elara felt herself falling into darkness. The fall into the sub-basement didn't kill them, but it shattered the silence. Kaelen pulled Elara from the debris, his tuxedo in tatters, eyes glowing a feral neon blue in the gloom. "We have to move," he growled, checking the hallway. "If they rigged the ballroom, A sweep team is next." They sprinted through the damp, winding corridors beneath the citadel, aiming for the East Armory. But they didn't make it. Rounding a corner, they skid to a halt. Blocking their path wasn't a squad of nameless mercenaries, but a single man leaning on a silver-headed cane. Duke Silas, Kaelen's uncle. "Nephew," Silas smiled, looking like a benevolent grandfather if not for the madness in his eyes. Behind him stood 6 heavily armed rogues. "You always were hard to kill." Kaelen pushed Elara behind him, claws extending. "Uncle, I should have known Serafina lacked the spine for a coup this size." "She was a distraction," Silas sneered. "I'm here to fix what you broke. Integrating with humans, banning the sale of Omegas. You're diluting our heritage, Kaelen. And look at you, crawling in the dirt with a banished mongrel." "Careful," Kaelen warned, his voice vibrating with lethal intent. "You're talking about my mate." Silas laughed coldly. "Then die with her. Kill them." The rogues opened fire. Kaelen launched himself forward, a blur of violence, tackling the first 2 men. But he was outnumbered. A rifle butt to the spine sent him to his knees, and a silver knife slashed his arm. He roared in pain, struggling to rise as 3 men pinned him down. Silas stepped forward, leveling a heavy revolver at Kaelen's head. "Goodbye, boy." "No!" Elara screamed. She didn't think. She just reacted. She broke cover, sprinting at the man who would kill her king. Silas turned the gun on her, firing a shot that grazed her cheek, but she didn't stop. She collided with him, tackling the older wolf to the concrete. Silas was strong, backhanding her with crushing force. He pinned her down, hands closing around her throat. "You are nothing," he snarled, "just a tool to be discarded." Elara's vision swam, her lungs burning. But as she looked at Kaelen, bleeding and helpless, something snapped. She grabbed a loose shard of concrete from the floor. "I," she gasped, "am the queen." She swung the rock with all her strength. It connected with Silas's temple with a sickening crunch. His grip loosened instantly as he slumped over, unconscious. Elara scrambled up, grabbing Silas's fallen revolver. She aimed the hand cannon at the rogues holding Kaelen. "Let him go!" she screamed, her voice echoing like a gunshot. "Or I blow his head off!" The rogues hesitated, looking from their fallen paymaster to the wild-eyed woman in the torn red dress. That split second was all Kaelen needed. He ripped his arms free, snapping the necks of his captors with terrifying efficiency. The remaining mercenaries dropped their weapons, surrendering. Kaelen didn't look at them. He fell to his knees before Elara, cupping her bruised face in his bloody hands. "You saved me," he breathed, adrenaline crashing into adoration. "We have to stop making a habit of this," she whispered, shaking. "I'm running out of dresses." Kaelen pulled her into a searing, desperate kiss that tasted of dust and victory. "Let's go upstairs. I have a kingdom to clean up." 3 days later, the Silver City was quiet under a fresh blanket of snow. Elara stood on the balcony of the royal suite, wrapped in Kaelen's coat. The last 72 hours had been a whirlwind. Silas and Serafina were in the dungeon, awaiting trial for treason. Elara, meanwhile, had become a legend, the Wolf of the Ridge, the Omega who took down a duke. The glass door slid open, and Kaelen stepped out, his injuries healing but still stiff. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I'm building you a new cabin," he murmured into her hair. "In the palace gardens, for when you need to escape." "I don't know if I fit in here, Kaelen," she admitted. "I'm still an exile at heart." "You are not an exile." Kaelen turned her to face him, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside sat a ring of twisted silver and black iron, unbreakable. "I convened the High Council this morning," he said. "The Omega laws are abolished. No more banishments. No more sails. You did that, Elara. He slid the ring onto her finger. Elara Vance, will you stay? Not as a guest, but as my queen, as my equal. Elara looked at the ring, then at the man who had come to her as a dying beast and risen to be a king worthy of the title. She smiled, warm and bright against the winter chill. Only if I get to drive the tank next time, she said. Kaelen laughed, a rich sound that echoed over the city. Deal. He kissed her, and as the snow fell around them, Elara knew she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was finally home, and that, my friends, is the legend of Elara and King Kaelen. From a freezing cabin in the middle of nowhere to the throne of the Silver City, it proves that sometimes the person you save is the only one who can save you back. I hope you enjoyed this roller coaster of romance, betrayal, and revenge. If you did, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. What did you think of Elara's decision at the end? Do you think Seraphina deserves forgiveness, or should she stay in the dungeon? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We upload fresh dramas, romances, and thrillers every single week. Thanks for listening, stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.